continuing on with our segment of different types of crosses that we would overcome, well, not overcome, but possibly maybe come across is a better term, and that is what are the possible outcomes of a cross between a black Angus bull and a red white-faced heifer. And this heifer is also heterozygous for horns, and the bull lacks horns. And this is an example of a codominant cross. Okay, if you remember from last week, we had completed what was an incomplete dominant cross. And what that meant was if you had a red poll, that's genotype, which meant red poll then, and the Charolais coat color had meant white. And typically when we come across dominant crosses, like tall and short and pea plants, or wrinkled and constricted is another example, or flower height, those are all terms when if the dominant trait's present, it masks over the recessive trait. But incomplete dominant crosses and codominant crosses are slightly different. In this case, we don't see where this is going to be red poll, okay, because we see that dominant trait is present. But what we would notice with this incomplete dominant cross, this does not mask that over for the red poll, rather than it's not fully expressed over the white. That's where you get the roan color. So we see 3 different genotypes with 3 different phenotypes. Otherwise, like we had mentioned, if you had tall in pea plants, we know that's tall. And of course, both recessive traits then would mean that of short, okay, and this was short. And if we had this intermediate form, but this is a complete dominant cross, that's still tall, okay. Again, our point is when it comes to an incomplete dominant cross and a codominant cross, it's going to be slightly different, to where notice that these two would give you the same result, but in incomplete dominant cross you get an intermediate form. And that's what we mean by roan, and then that of between the red poll and the white Charolais. Okay? But when it comes to a codominant cross, if you remember, the terms that you wrote down last week were as follows, where you had this was your Angus, this then was your red white face, and then this was your black white face. And what we see happening is very similar to that of the incomplete dominant cross. Here we're going to have 3 different genotypes resulting in 3 different phenotypes then. And notice that they're all capital letters, and that's what we mean by codominance, because both of them are being expressed at the same time. Here we see the black coat color, this is your Angus. Here we see what's referred to as the red white face. And notice when both of them are expressed, we see the black coat color from the Angus, and then we would see the white face from the Hereford. And that's why we refer to that as a codominant cross. Both of these dominant traits are being expressed at the same time. The black body and the white face giving us a black white face. So that is a codominant cross rather than incomplete. Okay, so how we proceed forward with this is as follows. We have our black Angus, okay, so we know that genetic makeup is this, okay, and it goes on later to say that he lacks horns, okay. So the next thing you want to do is make a key for this, just like what you did last week, and you can use any variable that you would choose, okay. So go ahead and do this, okay, because both recessive alleles have to be present, because we're only saying the coat color is codominant, not the horns. We know that the horns is a dominant cross, where if that dominant trait is present, the offspring or the adult has horns, and if both of them are recessive, well then the animal's polled or lacks horns. Okay, so here's our bull. It's a black Angus that lacks horns. Okay. Then it says the heifer then, okay, is a red white face. So now we can tell the difference. Notice how these bees are different than those. And it said it's heterozygous, so that means we got one of each. Okay. So there is our cross that we're going to work through. And maybe it's such an aspect where maybe you're asked, well, how many of the offspring are going to have horns? Well, good question. And that's why we go through and do this. And perhaps it's 25%, maybe it's 50%. Or what's the outcome of having a specific coat color and having horns, or specific coat color and lacking horns. So that's where we proceed forward and go ahead and do this cross then. Okay, so with this we will foil it out, okay, and we'll set up our cross now. We're making things nice and big here, so hopefully limiting our chances of mistakes. Okay. Go ahead and get this out of the way. All right. So now continue with our vertical lines. Extend them out a little further. Okay. So then as we would foil that out, and notice for the bull, there's only one type of outcome that could be, because we had two capital B's with no lines and then two recessive P's to illustrate that it was polled or lacked horns. Then when you go back and do the heifer, remember that was this genetic makeup. Okay, so then we foil this one out and we would have a big B with a line and then a capital P. Remember, first outside, inside, and then last. Okay. And as we proceed forward, okay, so that is correct. So now we'll go ahead and start filling in our blanks then, and proceed forward, and and again, this way, that way, makes no difference. Whatever you are more comfortable doing. And okay. And again. I think this last one's incorrect because that's that P and that one was recessive, but we can just go ahead and put the line over the top. And again, when you put that horizontal line, then you don't have to worry about, well, is that a capital P or lowercase p? It doesn't matter what size you write it. As long as you have that line over the top, now you know that's the recessive trait. Kind of helps if you feel you have messy handwriting, per se. And again, a lot of this is just taking your time, and good handwriting certainly help, and not be in a rush to try to get this done just as fast as you can, because you're not going to help yourself out if this is any bit unclear. Okay? But in this case, we'll try to get this done as soon as possible so we can get this downloaded, because I know you people don't want to go without having something to do. We can't have that. Okay, so, well, we could, but we're going to choose not to. Okay? And I know you all would agree with me, because you're laughing right now. Okay, so as we continue. Okay, and can probably see a general pattern that's starting to show up, and that is one of the things that we had established was when you're crossing this black Angus with that of a red white face, we're going to end up with all black white face, and that seems to be the case so far. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And like we had mentioned earlier, maybe it's one of those aspects, do we want to see what's the coat color going to be like and what are the chances of them having horns. Okay. Because as you continue with this, you probably enjoy talking about cattle, and that's an old bull. Now you're laughing again, so might as well have some fun while we're doing this, right? Okay, and our last. So, again, maybe the handwriting isn't as concise or as neat as maybe some of yours, and that's fine. Just as long as you can read it. Notice some of these letters may look like they're capitalized, but as long as they have a line over the top, we'll know which one's recessive and which one's dominant, and that even occurs in this codominant cross. Okay, so let's just go ahead and pick out a box. So we know this is black-white face, and it's got horns. Squiggly line in there. So we have black-white face, and there's horns. Okay, so therefore we see one. And there should have been a line over top of that one. And make sure. Yes, okay. So here we have a black-white face then that is pulled. So black-white face, no horns, or we can just put pull, being short for pulled. Okay, so maybe you want to find out all your different genetic combinations first. So black, white face, and horns. We've got 1, 2. This one shouldn't have 2 lines over the top. So again, sometimes what happens is if you're in a rush, mistakes can certainly increase. So black, white face, and horns, we've got 1, we've got 2. Maybe take this one back out so we don't get confused. Black, white face, and horns. 1, 2. Not. Okay, so 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, some of you have probably already perhaps caught a general pattern arising, and there's number 8. But sometimes you got to be careful. We're marking this one off, okay, so you don't get that mixed up with a line over the top, which is again very easy to do. So what we see happening is we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got 8 black, white face with horns. So then we have a black, white face and pulled or no horns. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, that general pattern is popping up. Goes out 50%. It's going to have horns. 50% of the time, there's going to be no horns. But one of the aspects you'll see is that 100% of the time, it's going to be a black-white face. Now, whether they have horns or whether they don't, it's going to be 8 out of 16 or 50% of the time. So that is how you complete a codominant cross between coat colors. Again, 2 capital B's with no lines is an Angus. 2 capital B's with 2 lines over the top is going to be a red-white face. And then 2 capital B's with only 1 line over the top is going to be a black-white face. So again, don't get these squiggle marks mixed up with your codominant cross. So we will pick up with this again at a later time.